This morning, a fact check. Hospitals across the country are desperate to find the gowns and the gloves and the face shields. Some states have received millions of pieces of that personal protective equipment and the N95 masks from the federal government. But now President Trump says that the strategic national stockpile is nearly depleted of those supplies, a few weeks into what doctors say could be a months-long crisis. But as far back as 2015, the National Institutes of Health acknowledged that in a pandemic, assuming 20 to 30% of the population would become ill, 1.7 to 3.5 billion respirators would be needed. 1.7 to 3.5 billion. Well, here's Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar in February, and this is before any stockpiled resources were deployed.
How many face masks do we have?
We currently have 30 million N95 respirators in the Strategic National Stockpile.
Consider that the 2015 government report that I referenced concluded that for pandemics with a lower attack rate and fewer cases, the number of respirators needed would be higher because the pandemic would have longer duration. 30 million at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. But President Trump has consistently blamed one person for the insufficient supply, his predecessor, former President Barack Obama.
Previous administrations gave us very little ammunition for the military and very little shelf space. Let me just tell you, you know it, you know the answer. The previous administration, the shelves were empty. The shelves were empty. So what you should do is speak to the people from the previous administration, Jim, and ask them that question, because the shelves were empty.
Now, at the start of the Trump administration, the repository's shelves were not empty. The Strategic National Stockpile has maintained a multi-billion-dollar inventory across several administrations, including tens of millions of pieces of that protective gear. But it is true that experts have warned that the supply, specifically of the N95 masks, has been precariously low since the H1N1 outbreak in 2009. Until the coronavirus response, the H1N1 response was the largest deployment in the history of the stockpile. According to the National Institutes of Health, more than 19 million pieces of the personal protective equipment and more than 85 million N95 respirators were used. And now listen to Greg Burrell. He's the former director of the Strategic National Stockpile.
Unfortunately, after we used those materials, we never received additional supplemental funding to replace those, nor were those funds provided in our regular appropriation base to be able to replace those materials.
Now, Burrell oversaw the stockpile from 2007 until January of this year. So that's the Bush administration, the Obama administration, and the Trump administration. And if President Trump knew that the supply of N95 masks was insufficient, well, then there's an obvious question.
You've been president now for more than 3 years. Why didn't you and your administration fill that shelf?
Yeah, I did. We did fill it twice. We filled it twice, and we've been distributing that for literally a year.
So why
we've been filling
out.
Nice question, Peter. Thank you very much. We've been filling it out, and we've been filling that stockpile many, many times. It's been filled many, many times.
Filled many, many times. Here's another exchange from that February Senate hearing with Secretary Azar, again before any of the stockpile was tapped for COVID-19 response.
Did you stockpile any of these critical supplies that we are told we need? Masks, protective suits, ventilators, anything? Is that stockpiled and ready?
So we do have in the Strategic National Stockpile ventilators, we have masks, we have...
Enough?
Well, of course not, or we wouldn't be asking for a supplemental to seek more money to procure more of that.
So N95 mask stockpile was depleted during the Obama administration, has not been replenished since. But there was a shared strategy on acquiring them, according to the former stockpiles director.
After the H1N1 event, we still hoped we could restock some of our materials, but we did know that all of these are commercially manufactured. Our hope was that we could buy these immediately on the market as we needed them to respond to such an event.
In fact, in its 2017 pandemic influenza plan, the Trump administration highlighted as an accomplishment of the last administration and one of its goals moving forward, developing technology and processes that allow for rapid production of N95 respirators to significantly increase respiratory supply during an influenza pandemic. The former HHS Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response told CBS News that for COVID, this would have been late December or early January of this year. So what happened?
The pandemic event started in China. which slowed down manufacturing of all types of materials that come from that area for the medical supply chain. After that slowdown of those manufacturing companies happened, we started to see China and other countries try to hold material within their own borders so that they could deal with the problem they were facing in that immediate sense. We found ourselves in the middle of a perfect storm.
A perfect storm, and our first responders are caught in it.